There's plenty still to learn. I'd say we might be the hub of a lot of the most activity, certainly the most buzz around offsite construction, for various reasons that we'll talk a little bit about. So setting the stage for what I mean when I say activity, we have probably 30 to 40 factories in California. Tracking these things is sort of hard. All of these are dedicated to housing production in some capacity. We have additional probably 1 to 2 dozen companies dedicated to software services or other consulting services related to offsite or industrialized construction that are doing various things in the sector. And certainly we have a ton of investment very much related to Silicon Valley and the interest in tech and the rising interest in big dollar figures related to solving the housing crisis. That is not to say all of that money has been invested successfully. We still have a lot of projects that are struggling to reach cost, time, performance targets, but we have a decent amount of successes. Companies that have existed for at least several years, hopefully many years longer, as well as projects that have been studied, some of which by Turner Center, where I work at UC Berkeley. We'll get into intros in a couple of seconds too. But some projects that have been studied with decent rigor and proven to have pretty substantial success related to their adoption of offsite construction. And so we're here to share some of the lessons we've learned as we've cut our teeth on offsite in the housing world in California. But by all means, there's still a lot of open questions that we are actively researching and asking ourselves as we try to make it work in a very high-demand market. So, as a means of introductions, I'm Tyler Pullen. I work for UC Berkeley's Turner Center, as well as our affiliated nonprofit Turner Labs, which does a lot of related innovation in housing programming, starting or supporting new companies in the housing space, and then some impending programming starting up in the next year, specifically related to offsite construction that I'll probably plug at the end. I've been researching this primarily from a civil engineering background for about 5 to 8 years. More and more I got interested in housing policy and how land use relates to offsite construction's adoption. And the more I got into that realm, the more my engineering mentors were like, we don't know what to do with you. And so I've surfed across fields into urban planning, housing policy, and I've now landed at Turner, where a lot of my research focuses on offsite. That's also the reason I've gotten to know these wonderful folks. So question of who you are, why are you here, how'd you get into modular?
My name is Amanda Gattenby with Unstoppable Construction. I've been in leadership positions in 2 volumetric modular factories in Los Angeles, California. Currently, I hold a general contractor's license. I'm in the ADU space in Tucson, and I do owner's rep and modular consulting for projects in California as well. My background is in affordable housing and construction, and that's how I came to modular, because I kept running into the same problems over and over and over about time, about inspections, about regulations, a lot of things that we've been talking about today. So that's how I got here.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name's Jan Lindenthal-Cox. I'm the Chief Investment Officer at the Housing Accelerator Fund. And I really enjoyed all the conversations so far today. And it's interesting because, and a fun fact that my fellow panelists may not know is about me, is that I wrote my graduate thesis on stick-built versus modular construction in upstate New York back in 1988. And so see me later if you want to know about what my conclusion was. But now, fast forward, I spent my whole career, over 30 years, in affordable housing development, and always wanting to try to figure out how to make modular work and coming close and not quite getting there. And also recognizing just how, in California, incredibly broken our affordable housing system is, really in every respect, virtually. So about a year ago, I left the affordable housing development space and joined the Housing Accelerator Fund because I really wanted to crack the code on how to finance and build affordable housing faster and at lower cost. And so at the Housing Accelerator Fund, we are a community development finance institution. So we're a nonprofit lender. And I'll share more about some of the things that we're doing to try to incentivize and address the barriers to modular construction a little later in the panel. So it's nice to be here.
Thanks, Jan. Hey all, Matt Smith with Factory OS. Thank you for having me. Talk a little bit about Factory OS, but kind of how I got into modular first. I actually got a little bit of modular growing up. So I grew up on the East Coast right outside of DC, but my dad, probably 20 years ago, was a single-family modular developer and contractor. And so that was kind of my first look into modular. Fast forward, many years, found myself at Factory OS, where I've been for 3 years. So Factory OS is a volumetric offsite modular construction company based in Vallejo, which is about 35 miles north of San Francisco. We've been around for about 6 years, really in production for about 5 years. Just finished our 27th project, so we've now built almost 3,000 units of housing in California. 23 of those have been affordable or supportive. So like these two, our panel here, big emphasis on affordable housing, big emphasis on what can we do to kind of solve this housing crisis that is very prevalent in California, but also kind of everywhere in the country. And so the kind of thought of Factory OS is, what can we do to lower the cost of construction, right? To build more housing, specifically affordable housing. We're super unique in that we are wall-to-wall Northern California Carpenters Union. So I think we're the only union housing manufacturer in the country, but I could be wrong on that. And what's important there is if you think about costs and really construction costs, labor is a big piece there, but really it's kind of the shrinking labor pool that is very prevalent in California, but also kind of everywhere. Older generations are retiring. Younger generations, my generation, is not getting into the trades. We've got a lot of demand, not much supply, high costs, right? Shrinking labor pool. And so we wanted to address that head on. And that is really the partnership with the Carpenters Union. 50% of our workforce, we employ about 250 factory workers. 50% of them were not in construction prior to joining Factory OS. So we've gone out, recruited minimum paying jobs. We've brought them into the factory. We've got a 12-month training program that we'll run you through. And so we say that if you come and work at Factory OS, you can leave here, for 1 year, you'll leave here with a toolkit of knowledge to never be unemployed again if you don't want to be. That's been really impactful. Additionally, 35% of our workforce, through a partnership with Delancey Street, which is a nonprofit in San Francisco, as well as the prison system, are second chance. So formerly homeless, formerly incarcerated, or battling substance abuse, that makes up a big piece of our workforce. And then as a result, kind of what we want to do, right? Let's address this housing crisis full circle. Let's pay our workers a living wage so they can afford to live in the housing that we're building. Has not been all roses, and so we'll get into kind of some of the lessons learned in a bit. But again, thank you for having me. Super excited to be here.
Thanks, everyone. I wanted to start off, you actually provided some of the context, Matt, but some additional notes from the panel on why you think the offsite industry, or at least the projects, have specifically sought out the California market so acutely. Let's start with Jan, who I know has talked to a lot of developers about this. Like, what is the specific appeal of offsite in California that might be more unique than, say, in a Utah context?
Yeah. So when Mary shared the cost of $600,000 from Minnesota and was apologizing by how high that cost was, or not apologizing, but acknowledging that that was high, that would be super low in California. Our median cost for an affordable unit is upwards of $750,000 a unit, and that was based on 2021 data. And I'm sure it's pushing $850,000 or $900,000 now. So that's. And at the same time, our affordable housing financing system in the state prioritizes low cost. So you have local municipalities that have requirements that are all very well intentioned, that really drive up costs, in addition to not having enough labor and some of the things that Matt was talking about. And you have a financing system that prioritizes lower costs. So there's a complete mismatch. So developers are incredibly hungry for solutions to be able to drive down the cost. And that's been both an opportunity and a challenge, because the financing system is so hyper competitive that you're asking people to innovate in an industry that isn't set up for that. You have no guarantee that you can actually ever get your project financed, which makes it hard to run an affordable housing business and also hard to set up a predictable pipeline if you're a modular manufacturer. But at the Housing Accelerator Fund, we wanted to prove concept that modular housing really could be faster and cheaper. And so with Factory OS and Mercy Housing, we piloted a project in San Francisco. It was built in less than 3 years for 40% lower cost, $377,000 a unit. And we're now working to replicate that model on another site in the city of San Francisco, although due to politics, not because of anything that has to do with modular, that project will be stick-built. So that's just a little window into some of the things that we deal with in California in terms of trying to get the cost down. But over and over again, what we hear from developers is we know that we can save time and money using modular construction, and we're struggling with how to be able to put the team together to innovate on that in the system that we're in.
California has a long history of affordable housing, and they have an entire industry built around these subsidies. So there's more funding now than ever for housing and homelessness due to the incredible critical need for this as a response. So these projects are matched perfectly for offsite construction, as they often leverage replication and they have a great sense of urgency around them. So not only subsidized, but also we're starting to see an infusion of private capital for deploying affordable housing. People are electing to deed restrict their own properties, and these are really ideal for modular, to go modular. There's a great need, there's a great big pipeline of money coming, but subsidies and also private capital. So that's why combined with the rising costs, that's why California has sort of picked up and run with modular, I feel.
Yeah, I think you both said it, but if you can deliver a project more cost effectively and faster, why wouldn't you, right? And so I think that's why we've had some success as you think about some of these super high cost markets, San Francisco, Oakland, Los Angeles. If you can deliver, a more cost effective product, then you will have business. I want to unpack something and just make a comment. San Francisco is quite the place, right? You can demonstrate that you can do something in half the time and at 40% costs, and the next one they won't do it again. That seems crazy to me, but that's maybe for a different day. But yeah, that's.
I think that highlights the difference between policy and politics.
Yes.
Which I heard someone comment on earlier. Always good to have a reminder. I'd also point to, and this panel doesn't directly reflect it, but I'm glad to follow Alcove and some of the other student teams that really emphasized the potential for ADUs. That is very much the case in California as well. Even though a lot of the factories in California are serving the multifamily and capital A affordable market, because that's where some of the highest demand and honestly most of the desperation is, there's still a burgeoning ADU market for small infill with duplexes, triplexes, and similar typologies that I think the whole sector is trying to get their mind around. There's a reason it's called missing middle. But in California, a few years ago, we had legislation go across the entire state unlocking the capacity for ADUs and smaller infill typologies, basically a state-level change to the zoning that functionally upzoned all single-family zoning, but they didn't call it that because it wouldn't have passed at the state-wide level. And so instead, we just unlocked capacity within what is still ostensibly single-family zoning. And a lot of factories are still actively trying to figure out how to navigate the financing, the political and kind of environment around small infill development to unlock all of the same advantages that we're seeing in the multifamily space at a smaller scale. So great to see student teams actively exploring those exact questions. So there are inevitably both benefits and disadvantages, or at least complications, to doing business in California. I'm curious if we could speak broadly to some of the most appealing things of working in California. What are partners or programs or policies that have made doing work easier for the offsite sector? And then in tandem, what are some of the things that make it continuously challenging?
Definitely the state plan review timelines and the state inspection process. The regulatory advantages cannot be denied. So with third party, they had the great infographic earlier about the different programs state by state, and California has third party plan review and third party inspections. With a rush on a third party plan review, we got plans approved for a 16-unit building in 3 days. I've also gotten plans reviewed for 132 units in 5 days. So, and then with the inspections, it was talked about on the previous panel, but having something leaving the factory with a state-improved insignia, and that you can point to that insignia and say, that has already been approved, as well as the education component with MBI or the factory themselves educating the inspectors, it really can take a lot of headache away from the contractor once everybody's on the same page. Let me say that.
What I would add about what I think some of the opportunities are is in California is that even though our industry is not fully developed yet, there have been a lot of projects that have been built. So there are contractors, there are factories, there are architects that have done this before. So that we're continuing to build that kind of base of expertise, which is really critical. If you're an affordable housing developer, like the first thing you want to do is put your team together that has some experience doing this. And now there really are multiple architects, multiple contractors that have experience that you can pull a team together, and they're not all doing it for the first time. So I think that's a huge opportunity that we have now in California to really take the next leap. The other thing I'll say, speaking as a former developer, having California-based manufacturers, to me, was really important. When the organization I worked for previously, when we were looking at modular housing, our options were bringing in boxes from Idaho or from British Columbia. And I really struggled with that because I want to create the jobs locally, as Matt was saying. Like, to me, that's another part of what we're trying to do with affordable housing, is also create great jobs. And some pushback that we would get as a developer at the local level about modular wasn't about the quality or anything like that, but it would be about the jobs. You're taking jobs out of our community. So when we could say, well, actually, there's a factory here in the Bay Area that we can work with on this project, that really diffuses that potential criticism of modular. So those are some of the opportunities that I see. We've got, experienced teams, and we've got manufacturers based in the state that we can work with.
Yeah, I'll echo what Amanda said a bit about HCD. I mean, HCD has been an incredible partner to Factory OS, but really every.
That's our state-level housing agency, the Department of Housing and Community Development. We speak in acronyms.
HCD has been an incredible partner of ours, and really some of the permitting timelines are pretty amazing. I had never heard of any in 5 days. That's awesome. I would love to learn a little bit more about that project. But I want to take a moment to give a little kudos to kind of the Housing Accelerator Fund, right? As you think about California, and I can say this because I'm not from there and I've only lived there for 3 years, it's one of the most innovative places in the world, right? And so there are so many different organizations working together to try and solve the problem. And the problem that we're faced with right now is this housing crisis, right? And so I think, the work that the Housing Accelerator Fund is doing and other organizations to kind of see what the problems are, right? Why hasn't modular succeeded? Or what is Factory OS or X manufacturer dealing with right now that's limiting them from being successful? And what can we do to kind of solve that has been really game-changing, right? And one of the biggest kind of issues that is faced with probably every single manufacturer is this bonding capacity, right? Think about a lot of the projects that we build, a lot of the projects that a lot of the manufacturers build are publicly funded, affordable tax credit projects. A lot of them require a bond, and the reality is it's a young industry. No matter how good you are as a company, it's challenging to get a bond. And so the Housing Accelerator Fund has really tried to address that, which is exciting. And I think that similar organizations will kind of step in and help the industry grow. Because as Jan said, the more that we have contractors, the more projects that Factory OS and Synergy do together, or Dahlen Architects, and we can rinse and repeat, the more successful the industry will be, the more the industry will grow. So.
Thanks. One last question from me, and then I'm going to open it up to the crowd because candor is often the most insightful conversation you can have. I know I'm privileged in my research role to often know about a lot of interesting initiatives that are pending. I know you three personally and sort of institutionally have some interesting stuff going on. And so I'm curious if you could talk about what are some of the initiatives you see launching soon, anytime in the next 5 or so years that you're excited about.
Well, I can jump in on that since Matt set me up really well. So what the Housing Accelerator Fund has been working to do, and we now have secured a commitment from our inaugural investor, is to raise a fund to address the barriers associated with modular construction in California. And our intention is to ultimately be able to offer 3 different products. One is, and this is the product that we'll be able to launch first because it's the easiest, is a deposit loan program. So early stage non-recourse loans to nonprofit developers, or to affordable housing developers, I should say, that are using modular construction to finance those early stage deposits so that they can, and this is what John said earlier, how the key, in my experience, to really achieving the savings with modular construction is to decide to do it from the beginning and to get that team together, have your architect, your factory, your contractor. But for a developer, that means you've got to spend more money than you would otherwise earlier. And so where we can use this loan fund to be able to make early stage loans to developers and help kind of incentivize them and share some of that risk, we can incentivize more developers to get into modular construction. And then ultimately, with what we hope to raise more funds for this fund to be able to address 2 other barriers. One is the bonding that Matt spoke about, to be able to provide a pool so we could self-insure for bonding for modular projects and basically help to grow younger companies and build their bonding capacity. And then the third product is a builder's risk insurance. So in California, builder's risk insurance is crazy expensive anyway. And if you're building a modular project, the premium is double. And we just were working on a project that we were financing where not only was the builder's risk premium double, but there was $1 million deductible for water damage because the project was modular. And that's just insane. So where, again, we can create a pool for developers to be able to self-insure for the builder's risk and drive down those premiums, because ultimately the insurance market should recognize the time savings of modular construction and the lower premium that would result from that, because you're insuring a building for a much shorter period of time. But we haven't seen that yet. But our goal in raising this fund is to get us from where we are today to 5 years from now when we've got a more mature, stabilized industry.
That's amazing. I didn't know about those other programs that you're doing, especially the insurance one. I think kind of what I'm most excited about, call it the next 5 years, is really starting to address this missing middle housing, right? I know Amanda spoke about it. Publicly funded tax credit projects can only go so far, and so the more that we can, do a 80 to 100% AMI project privately financed, will have a huge impact in California and everywhere. So I'm super excited about that opportunity. And we're working on a project right now that's under construction that will be 235 units of housing, 80% AMI in West Oakland. It'll be a mix of studios, 1s and 2 bedrooms, all privately funded, low interest debt from city community capital, impact equity from an impact investor in Southern California. We'll deliver that project for $425,000 a door, hard and soft costs. If you were to build that conventionally in West Oakland, it would be $650,000, maybe $700,000 a door. So the more that we can do that, the more impact we'll have. So I think that's kind of what I'm most excited about, is addressing this missing middle.
Okay, so I like to say modular years are like dog years because so many things happen We have so much innovation, so much progress happening all the time. So what I'm looking forward to in the next 35 dog years is that there are more and more players coming online, and this is very exciting. We really need all of us together to solve the housing crisis. So I'm looking forward to seeing more modular buildings in every major American city. And I'm also looking forward to something that we really need to get behind as an industry, and that's standardization. Right now, if one factory drops out, it's very difficult for another factory to pick it up because each one of the factories has their own little system and their own way of building things. So I'm really looking forward to standardization and the emergence of a bunch of new players and a bunch of new buildings.
And as for Turner Center and labs, we will continue publishing research related to this and other topics that you can easily follow us to keep up on. One of our pending projects is specifically around the feasibility of offsite construction for missing middle housing. So pressure Dan to fund us because it's coming from HUD if we get that award. And more excitingly, I think, we as Turner Labs, the nonprofit affiliate of Turner Center, pushing out an accelerator program called the Builders Lab in mid-2024 to specifically collect and then foster and facilitate small emerging companies trying to use industrialized construction methods to address different needs across regions in the US. Looking at different technologies, business models, or other innovations in the construction space to really create a multifaceted way of addressing these sector-wide issues. So follow Turner Center and Turner Labs to hear more about that initiative. In the meantime, what questions might we have from the crowd for this esteemed panel?
Hey, thank you all for what you're doing in California. I do a lot of work there, run into a lot of the same scenarios you have. One thing I wanted to mention for the good of you, but also hopefully that some others will hear this example and take it up. No pressure, Representative Peters. So one of the initiatives in California I'm working on that I was appointed to by Governor Newsom is what they call their Sites Initiative. Don't know if you've heard of it, probably not. It started when he was going through his recall, and imagine how politics turns into policy. But I was put on a panel or a committee with myself, leadership of HCD, iBank, members of the governor's staff, and we had a map of 90,000 state-owned properties that we were challenged with looking at, not only for places for location of affordable housing, access to public transit, places in greater need, but also areas that were most appropriate to build modular manufacturing facilities. There was a $500 million commitment behind that initiative to start. Well, all of a sudden, Governor Newsom got through his recall. So didn't do anything for a year or so. Now we're back again. Our sites have been limited to 45,000 sites, state-owned properties. And my point to that is all this is to say, here's a great initiative that if any state would get behind and do something similar that could see it through to the end, could be extremely impactful in addressing affordable housing. You have the state, in California, iBank controls all their state money. So you have the money person involved, you have the sites taken care of because the state owns them and would essentially donate them to build affordable housing, and donate them to modular manufacturers that want to either expand their footprint in the state or come into your state to do business and build affordable housing. So that's exciting things that I hope we'll see to come to fruition in California. Only the politicians know, unfortunately. But I also hope that other states may see this opportunity and idea and take it and do something with it that will actually see a result for the affordable housing. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And that, to me, echoes what we heard this morning from Ryan and Evan, or Ivan, excuse me, something I didn't realize in Sweden and Japan, that government investment, that public investment in, really helped to grow and stabilize the industry, and that we just haven't had that. And so if through the government, let's work together on that with our governor to be able to get that investment. I would say let's try to shore up the companies that we already have and allow them to grow and expand and be able to be even more successful. And maybe there's room in the market for more. I'll let Matt speak to that. But there just hasn't been that investment. And somebody else acknowledged the cost to stand up an operation like Autoball and the level of capital investment that's required. Like that isn't something that a private business can do without some financial support. So I think that's a really good call out.
Just one quick comment. I think even beyond direct financial support or providing sites that we've seen from our international examples and study trips is even just serving as a platform for aggregate demand. The government can do quite a lot. Some of our colleagues that work in the UK specifically talked about a City of London initiative where they just put sort of an unenforceable percentage goal for the housing built on public land. I think this was from one of their transit agencies, saying we would like, generally, for about 25% of all the housing built on our public land over the next some amount of years to be built using modern methods of construction, is their version of modular or offsite, generally. And they've far exceeded, thank you, language is hard. They far exceeded that goal. I think they're sitting at around 40% of their projects have utilized offsite construction. They didn't attach dollars to that. They didn't require the industry to somehow meet that target by having some form of enforcement, but they just set out that policy goal saying we encourage more innovative methods of construction for housing built on government land, and that sent a really important signal to the market, private and public sector actors, that this was a direction they were moving in. And even that somewhat symbolic effort from government partners can be really crucial.
It kind of goes back to what Justin was saying earlier about, we won't get that investment unless we fix the regulatory and we fix the government help.
My question is, I think for Matt and Jan mostly, but Matt, you mentioned the project in Oakland is private capital. And as you've talked about setting out the right environment to attract capital, what do you think are the most promising early investors in offsite construction? And what have you seen as some of the most promising ideas for incentives or for setting an innovation atmosphere to attract that capital?
Yeah, I'd like your take on it too, Jan. I think what we've been able to do to kind of attract that capital, I think the capital's there, right? Especially as you think about more of this kind of ESG type of investing. The more that we can highlight the benefits of sustainability, right? Hey, we've got X amount less waste on a project using Factory OS modular as opposed to conventional build, right? And we have no drywall waste because all of our units are 9-foot clear ceilings, so you can get 2 4.5-foot sheets going horizontally, no drywall waste. If you look at conventional, 40% of the drywall that you buy is wasted, right? So I think that like playing there is something you can do. You can also kind of sell this certainty, right? And the more that you use a catalog or a standard, what Amanda was saying, a standardized floor plan, the less risk there is. So that makes it, more attractive for capital too, right? This studio unit, we've now built 1,000 times, right? So we know what it costs, we know how long it takes to cost, we know that it's permittable. And so those kind of from concept, there's way less risk for someone that's going to finance a project. So I think that's something that we continue to kind of harp on. And then what was the second part of your question? What government or yeah, great. So I think that Tyler was talking a little bit about it, but there's two things that kind of I think about, right? And so one is, do you score publicly funded projects better if they're using innovation, right? Hey, you're going to get X amount more points on your application if you're doing some type of innovation. That seems like an easy one and one that could really take the industry to the next kind of level. A little bit more complicated one is, hey, Factory OS or X manufacturer builds 500 units of publicly funded housing a year, and we've done it for the last 4 years. Well, HCD funds those projects, right? So can we get into an arrangement where, again, playing on standardization, we're going to build 100 units that we know we're going to build for HCD, right? Fund those right now and give the factory the flexibility of when they want to build them, right? Hey, this project just didn't get its financing, so now we've got a production gap. Okay, well, we know that HCD is going to finance at least 100 units for us every single year, and so we can build 50 of them in this time period to allow us to continue to operate in a profitable manner. So those are kind of two things. I hope that answers your question.
It's a really good idea.
So from the Housing Accelerator Fund standpoint, I mentioned the Industrialized Construction Catalyst Fund that we've raised, and we're going to launch that pilot product this fall. We're also working to close a second fund, which is an innovation fund, and that will close hopefully first quarter of next year. And it's designed to finance projects that are driving down cost and time. So not specifically industrialized construction, although we expect that those are going to be a lot of the projects that we'll be able to finance with this fund. But the idea is to take, Matt spoke about the certainty in terms of like the design and the permitting and all of that, but there's also in California financing uncertainty. And one of my biggest takeaways moving from the seat of a developer to a lender is really being able to have a fresh perspective on how much the cost of uncertainty is baked into every line item in our project budget. The architect charges us more. Of course, they have to. The contractor charges us more because they don't know when the project is going to be built. Are they going to be sitting on these plans for a couple of years? If you could actually say to your project team, this project will start construction next April. Now what's it going to cost me? It's going to be dramatically different. I know it. In addition to, in the interest rate environment that we're in, the financing costs, like the insurance costs, the interest costs. So this fund is designed to basically replace the competitive sources of financing in the capital stack and allow developers to, go directly past go and go straight to home free or whatever it is, and be able to get their financing and start construction on a schedule. And we think that that's going to be really critical to being able to really unlock the cost savings that we think modular has to offer.
I'll also just mention on the government side, sort of a quiet behemoth of funding and support has been the Department of Energy. They funded a lot of one-off case study projects and other analyses on the energy performance of offsite construction, trying to do life cycle analyses, tracking embodied carbon or material waste or the energy efficiency that could be gained from building to a higher quality standard. And I think their foot is in the door of this space. They see offsite construction as a great vehicle for ensuring that the massive unbuilt housing stock that we're looking forward to as housers is built with the tiniest environmental footprint that it can be. And so I know they're continuously probing for opportunities and ways to partner with factories and to possibly stand up the sector in a much bigger way. We did it. We solved it. Good job, everybody. I'm also not sure how we're doing on time, but.
So, going back to the earlier conversation and what we heard from Ivan and Ryan, California in and of itself has a bigger economy than Sweden, and probably a decent fraction of Japan. So, as exciting as it is to think about opportunities for standardization and cross-state collaboration, you all are big enough that you could do it on your own. You all could see forward a lot of these aims just within the state. And so, obviously recognizing the importance of governmental resources as a Kickstarter here, but just, thinking about the kinds of, regulatory framework and structures and everything that we've heard about from Sweden and Japan, how much opportunity do you see to move that forward within the current environment in California? How much do you see, if you took these guys on a road show around the state or just meeting with state officials to talk about how California could be, could build like Japan, how much uptake do you think there would be for that kind of pitch within California?
Well, the standardization part, it doesn't even have to be floor plans. It can be assemblies. It can be connection methods. There's a lot of room for standardization across the state and across all the platforms, I think.
I can't help also but try and plug more regional governance. The same questions or problems we've talked about with the 19,000 plus cities in the US. The Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, which we talk about as a unified entity, is 9 separate counties with 101 different jurisdictions. That's 101 plus different city councils, each of which has their localized building code. So even trying to be a regional player like FactoryOS involves having to change plans and adjust them if you're doing it one zip code, or doing a project one zip code over. And so I know there are conversations and hopeful efforts along with some of the folks on this panel to try and drive more regional standing. The regional governing bodies that sit in between individual jurisdictions and the state could help us navigate some of these issues, maybe even set like Bay Area standard floor plan or assembly method as a compromise to doing a state top-down level building code, or just trying to get 101 jurisdictions to agree voluntarily. And so it's an uphill climb for sure, but that's something I have hope for. I see a quiet clap from an admin human in the background, which I think means we can wrap it up. I appreciate all your time, and certainly for the panel.